My daughter Sloane was 7 when she asked me why the other parents crossed the street when they saw us coming. I didn't have an answer then, but I sure do now. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Picture this. It's 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon outside Thornfield Academy, one of the most exclusive private schools in Dallas. I'm standing there in my work clothes, motor oil still under my fingernails from the transmission I'd been rebuilding all morning. My hands are clean, but you can always tell a mechanic by the permanent stains that no amount of scrubbing will remove. Around me, parents are arriving in their German luxury cars, their Italian leather shoes clicking against the pristine sidewalk as they glide toward the school entrance like they own the world. And then there's me and Sloane. I watch as Jennifer Morrison, whose husband owns half the commercial real estate downtown, literally takes 3 steps to the left when she sees us approaching. Her daughter Camden used to play with Sloane during their first year at Thornfield, back when my wife Celeste was alive and we could still blend in with the crowd. Now Jennifer won't even make eye contact. "Daddy," Sloane whispers, her small hand tugging on mine with the kind of desperate urgency only a 7-year-old can manage. "Why don't they like us?" I look down at my daughter, this beautiful little girl with her mother's dark eyes and my stubborn chin, wearing her perfectly pressed school uniform that I ironed at 5 in the morning before my first job. She's everything good in this world, and these people treat her like she's invisible because her father smells like engine grease and drives a beat-up Honda. I force a smile, the same one I've been practicing in the mirror for 2 years, and squeeze her hand. They're just busy. "Sweetheart, come on, let's get you home for snacks." But standing there, watching Vivian Harper whisper something to the cluster of mothers near the school steps while pointing in our direction, I had no idea that in exactly 3 months, everything would change. I had no idea that a woman named Cordelia Blackwood was about to walk into our lives with an impossible challenge that would flip our entire world upside down. And I definitely had no idea that the same people who crossed the street to avoid us would soon be fighting for our attention. What I did know, standing there with my daughter's innocent question hanging in the air like a prayer, was that something had to change. I just never imagined it would start with a broken engine and end with the most unexpected proposal of my life. Let me tell you how we got here, because our story didn't start with crossed streets and whispered gossip. It started with love and loss and the kind of determination that only comes when you're fighting for someone more important than yourself. 2 years ago, my wife Celeste and I were living what felt like the American dream. She worked as a nurse at Presbyterian Hospital. I ran my own small auto repair shop, and Sloane was thriving in kindergarten at Thornfield Academy. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. Celeste had insisted on Thornfield because she'd grown up poor and wanted Sloane to have every opportunity she never had. "Education opens doors," she'd say, reviewing the school brochures like they held the secrets to the universe. Then came February 15th, 2022. Black ice on I-35, a semi-truck that couldn't stop in time. 3 hours in surgery that ended with a doctor telling me the words that split my life into before and after. Celeste was gone, and suddenly I was a single father trying to hold together a world that felt like it was collapsing around us. The medical bills came first. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. Then the reality of single parenthood hit. I couldn't run my shop and pick up Sloane from school. I couldn't work evenings when she needed dinner and homework help. Within 6 months, I'd lost most of my regular customers and had to close the shop. Now I work wherever I can find it, fixing cars and driveways, doing oil changes at quick lube places, taking any mechanical job that fits around Sloane's schedule. But I kept her at Thornfield. Call it stubbornness, call it love, call it the last promise I could keep to my dead wife. But I wasn't going to let Celeste's dreams for our daughter die with her. The tuition is crushing me, eating up nearly 60% of my income. But I pay it, even when it means we eat cereal for dinner 3 nights a week, even when it means I haven't bought new clothes for myself in 18 months. The other parents started noticing the changes immediately. When Celeste was alive, we'd been the friendly young couple who volunteered for school events and hosted play dates. Now I'm the widowed father who shows up to parent-teacher conferences straight from work, apologizing for the grease under my fingernails. My 1998 Honda Civic looks ancient next to the parade of BMWs and Mercedes in the school pickup line. Vivian Harper made sure I understood where I stood in the new social order. At the fall parent mixer, I overheard her telling a group of mothers, "I feel so sorry for that little girl. Her father tries, bless his heart, but she's going to struggle to fit in here." Children notice these things, you know. When she realized I'd heard her, she didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. She just smiled that practiced smile, wealthy women perfect, and said, "Darius, we were just talking about the upcoming fundraiser. I don't suppose you'll be able to contribute much this year. The worst part isn't the condescending comments or the way conversations stop when I walk into a room. The worst part is watching it affect Sloane. My bright, social little girl who used to chatter nonstop about her friends has grown quiet. She stopped asking why we don't get invited to birthday parties. She stopped mentioning the play dates that other kids talk about, but she never gets to join. Last month, I found her in her bedroom having a tea party with her stuffed animals, practicing conversations with imaginary classmates. "Hi, Camden," she was saying to her teddy bear. "Do you want to sit with me at lunch today?" Then she'd move to another stuffed animal and shake her head, saying in a different voice, "Sorry, I'm sitting with the other girls." My heart broke watching her rehearse rejection with toys, because the real children had already delivered it so many times. 3 weeks ago, she climbed into my lap after another day of being ignored at school and said, "Daddy, maybe I should go to a different school where we fit in better. Maybe somewhere the kids' parents work with their hands too." That's when I knew something had to change. I'd been telling myself that keeping her at Thornfield was about giving her opportunities. But what if I was just subjecting her to a daily reminder that we didn't belong? What if my stubborn pride was hurting the person I was trying to protect? Then came the invitation to the annual fundraiser gala. Black tie optional, it said, though everyone knows that at Thornfield, black tie is never really optional. Sloane saw the elegant invitation on our kitchen counter, and her eyes lit up with the first genuine excitement I'd seen in months. "Daddy, are we going to the fancy party? Will you wear a tuxedo like in the movies?" I looked at my 7-year-old daughter, so hopeful, so ready to believe that maybe this time things would be different, and I couldn't say no. I scraped together $300 I didn't have to rent a tuxedo that didn't quite fit, and bought the cheapest ticket available. One night, I told myself, I could give her one normal night where her father belonged in her world, even if it was just pretend. Walking into the Thornfield Academy Gala felt like stepping into a different universe. The hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and gold accents, round tables draped in ivory silk with centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos chatted easily with women whose jewelry caught the light like tiny stars. Everyone belonged here except me. My rented tuxedo felt like a costume that didn't quite fit the part I was trying to play. The pants were a half-inch too long, the jacket pulled slightly across my shoulders, and the bow tie kept shifting no matter how many times I adjusted it. I'd practiced tying it from a YouTube video, but it still looked amateur compared to the effortless elegance surrounding me. Sloane looked beautiful in the navy dress we'd found at a consignment shop. She'd insisted on wearing her mother's pearl earrings, tiny studs that Celeste had worn on our wedding day. "Now I have Mommy with me at the fancy party," she'd said, touching them gently as we walked in. For a moment, seeing her face light up at the decorations and live jazz music, I thought maybe this would be okay. Then Vivian Harper appeared at my elbow like a perfectly dressed shark sensing blood in the water. "Darius, you made it. How wonderful." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I've been meaning to have a little chat with you." She guided me toward a quieter corner near the silent auction tables, where framed artwork and weekend getaway packages displayed price tags that made my stomach clench. "Some of us parents have been having conversations about Sloane's situation," she continued, her voice honey-sweet, but with steel underneath. "We're all very fond of her, of course, but we can't help noticing how she's been struggling socially. Children can be so perceptive about these things, you know. They pick up on when families don't quite match the school culture. I watched Sloane across the room, standing awkwardly near a group of her classmates who were giggling about something she clearly wasn't part of. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. What exactly are you suggesting, Vivian? I'm simply saying that perhaps Sloane would be happier somewhere more suited to your circumstances. There are perfectly good public schools in the area. She could make friends with children who come from similar backgrounds. The dismissal in her voice, the casual way she wrote off my daughter's future, made my jaw tighten. But before I could respond, the auctioneer called everyone to their tables for the main event. The auction started with small items, gift certificates and spa packages that went for hundreds of dollars. I nursed a single glass of wine that had come with dinner, watching parents casually bid thousands on weekend trips to Aspen and private chef experiences. The easy way they threw around money that represented months of my income made me feel smaller with each passing lot. Then they announced the Daddy-Daughter Princess Day package. A full day at a luxury resort with spa treatments, a professional photo shoot, and a fancy dinner. The kind of magical experience I'd dreamed of giving Sloane but could never afford. I saw her eyes light up as the auctioneer described horse-drawn carriage rides and princess dress-up. She turned to look at me with that hopeful expression that had become rarer and rarer over the past 2 years. Daddy, could we do that? The bidding started at $500. I raised my hand, my heart already racing. $700. I stayed in. $1,000. Still manageable if I skipped a few more meals. $1,500. My credit card could handle it maybe. Then it jumped to $2,500. $3,000. $3,500. The casual way other parents raised their paddles like they were ordering coffee made my hands shake. But I kept bidding because Sloane was watching. Because for once I wanted to give her something magical. Because I was tired of always being the father who had to say no. At $4,200, I raised my paddle one final time. The room fell silent as the auctioneer called going once, going twice. I pulled out my credit card, praying it would work, knowing I'd figure out how to pay for it later. I'm sorry, sir, but your card has been declined. The words echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Conversation stopped, heads turned. The auctioneer, clearly uncomfortable, moved on to the next bidder while I stood there frozen, my financial humiliation on display for everyone who had ever looked down on us. Sloane's face crumpled, not just disappointment, but the crushing realization that we really were different, that we really didn't belong. Tears started streaming down her cheeks as other children pointed and whispered, "This is exactly what I was talking about." Vivian's voice cut through my shame like a blade. "You're setting that poor child up for constant disappointment. How many more times will she have to watch you fail her before you admit you can't give her what she needs?" Something inside me snapped. 2 years of swallowing pride, 2 years of quiet humiliation, 2 years of watching my daughter shrink a little more each day. "At least I'm here for my daughter every single day," I shot back, my voice louder than I intended. "When's the last time you actually spent time with yours instead of paying someone else to raise her? When's the last time you read her a bedtime story or helped with homework or just listened to her talk about her day?" Vivian's face went white with shock and rage. "How dare you?" The confrontation had drawn a crowd. Parents whispered behind, their hands while their children watched wide-eyed. I had just burned every bridge I might have had, destroyed any chance of Sloane finding acceptance here. That's when I heard a calm voice behind me say, "That was quite a show." I turned around to find myself face to face with Cordelia Blackwood, and immediately I understood why everyone in the room had been stealing glances at her all evening. She wasn't just wealthy, she commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with money. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a way that somehow looked effortless and expensive at the same time. But it was her eyes that caught me off guard, dark and intelligent, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Walk with me," she said quietly. Not a request, but not quite a command either. I glanced back at Sloane, who was being comforted by one of the teachers, then followed Cordelia through the ballroom doors. The cool evening air hit my face as we stepped into the hotel parking lot. She led me past rows of luxury vehicles until we stopped in front of a car that made me forget how to breathe for a moment. A 1967 Shelby GT 500, midnight blue with white racing stripes, sitting under the parking lot lights like a piece of automotive art. Even from 5 feet away, I could hear the engine ticking as it cooled, could smell the faint scent of high octane. Fuel and hot metal. Beautiful, isn't she? Cordelia ran her hand along the hood with the kind of reverence most people reserved for religious artifacts. This was my father's pride and joy. He bought it new off the lot in '67, drove it every weekend until the day he died, left it to me along with everything else. I walked around the car slowly, taking in details that most people would miss. The original Magnum 500 wheels, the functional hood scoop, the way the chrome bumpers caught the light. This wasn't just a classic car, it was automotive history, worth more than I'd make in 5 years, maybe 10. Here's the problem, Cordelia continued, popping the hood to reveal the massive 428 Cobra jet engine. She hasn't run right in months. Starts fine, idles okay for a few minutes, then starts running rough. Sometimes she'll smooth out on her own, sometimes she won't. I've taken her to 3 different mechanics, all of them certified specialists who charge more per hour than most people make in a day. They've replaced parts, adjusted timing, rebuilt the carburetor twice. Nothing works. I leaned over the engine. Bay, my trained eye immediately cataloging what I saw. Someone had definitely been tinkering with it, but not necessarily improving it. There were aftermarket parts that didn't belong, modifications that seemed to fight against the original design rather than enhance it. Why are you showing me this? I asked, though part of me already suspected where this conversation was heading. Cordelia closed the hood and turned to face me directly. Because I've been watching you for months, Darius Chen. I know you pick up your daughter every day at 3:15 in that Honda Civic that somehow still runs despite having more miles on it than most commercial trucks. I know you've never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when you come straight from work with motor oil under your fingernails. I know you volunteer for every school fundraiser and carnival, always working behind the scenes setting up tables and cleaning up afterward while other parents pose for photos. Her words caught me completely off guard. I'd assumed, like everyone else, that I was invisible to the wealthy elite who ran the school. Here's my proposition, she said, her voice steady and serious. Fix this engine. Really fix it, not just patch it up like those other mechanics tried to do. If you succeed, I'll write a check that covers Sloane's tuition through graduation. Full scholarship, no questions asked. My heart started racing. Sloane's education secured, the financial pressure lifted, the chance for her to belong somewhere, without me having to sacrifice everything just to keep her there. But there's more, Cordelia continued. I'll also marry you. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You heard me correctly. I'll marry you, making both you and Sloane part of one of the wealthiest families in Texas. Those people in there who wouldn't give you the time of day will be falling over themselves to get your attention. Sloane will never be looked down on again. Why would you possibly want to marry someone you barely know? Her expression softened slightly. The business mask slipping for just a moment. Because I've been married twice before. Both times to men who looked perfect on paper but turned out to be selfish, shallow creatures who cared more about their golf handicaps than being decent human beings. I've learned that character matters, more than breeding, that a man who would sacrifice everything for his child is worth more than all the trust fund babies in Dallas combined. And if I fail to fix the engine, then you agree to withdraw Sloane from Thornfield immediately and never contact me again. You'll also publicly acknowledge that you're not qualified to work on serious automobiles. Your reputation as a mechanic ends. The stakes hit me like a physical blow. Everything I was trying to protect for Sloane, gone. My livelihood, destroyed. But also the chance to give her everything I'd ever dreamed of, handed to me on a silver platter. 1 week, Cordelia said, pulling keys from her purse and placing them in my palm. 7 days to prove what those other mechanics couldn't. Think carefully, Darius. This isn't just about fixing an engine. This is about whether you're willing to risk everything you have left for the chance to give your daughter the life she deserves. I looked back toward the hotel where through the windows I could see Sloane still surrounded by teachers, still wiping tears from her cheeks. Then I looked at the keys in my hand, warm from Cordelia's touch. I'll do it, I said, the words leaving my mouth before my brain could stop them. I'll fix your father's car. Cordelia smiled for the first time that evening, and suddenly I understood why she commanded so much respect. It wasn't just money or power. It was the absolute certainty that when she made a decision, she followed through completely. I hope you know what you're getting into, Darius Chen, because starting tomorrow, your entire future depends on whether you can solve a puzzle that has stumped everyone else. 7 days later, I stood in my garage at 6 p.m. sharp, wiping my hands on a shop rag that had seen better days. The Shelby sat in the center of the space like a silent judge, its hood raised to expose the engine I'd been wrestling with for a week. Every bolt, every wire, every component had been examined, tested, and in some cases, replaced. But the real test was about to begin. Cordelia arrived first, stepping out of a black Mercedes sedan wearing a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She surveyed my makeshift garage, taking in the concrete floor stained with decades of motor oil, the pegboard walls lined with tools I'd collected over 20 years of working on cars, the work lights hanging from chains bolted to the ceiling joists. Interesting workspace, she said, running her finger along my main workbench. Very authentic. Then the other cars started arriving. I watched through the open garage door as luxury vehicles pulled up along the street like a parade of wealth. Vivian Harper climbed out of her white Range Rover, her face set in that familiar expression of barely concealed disdain. Behind her came Jennifer Morrison, the Caldwells, the Hendersons, and at least a dozen other parents from Thornfield Academy. I brought witnesses, Cordelia explained as the crowd gathered just inside the garage entrance. If you succeed, they need to see it with their own eyes. If you fail, well, they'll see that too. Sloane appeared at my side, having walked over from our neighbor's house where she'd been waiting. She carried my old red toolbox, the one that had belonged to my father, before me, and set it down next to the car with the solemnity of a knight presenting a sword. "You can do this, Daddy," she whispered, standing on her tiptoes to hug my waist. "I believe in you." I looked out at the faces watching us. Some seemed genuinely curious. Others appeared to be here for the entertainment value of watching me fail spectacularly. Vivian Harper had her phone out, probably ready to record my humiliation for posterity. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "This beautiful machine has been giving everyone trouble for months. 3 certified mechanics, all with impressive credentials and expensive hourly rates, have tried to solve the problem. They've replaced parts, rebuilt systems, and basically thrown money at it until they gave up." I moved to the engine bay, pointing to specific components as I spoke. Here's what I discovered. Someone, probably with good intentions, tried to modernize this classic engine with aftermarket parts. They installed a new electronic ignition system that doesn't play well with the original carburetor. They upgraded the fuel pump to a higher pressure model that overwhelms the float chamber. They even changed the spark plug wires to modern silicone ones that create different resistance values than the engine was designed for. Vivian Harper spoke up from the back of the crowd. "So you're saying previous mechanics were incompetent? How convenient." "No, I'm saying they were trying to make individual components work instead of understanding that this engine is a complete system. Every part affects every other part. When you change one thing, you create ripple effects throughout the entire setup." I began removing the aftermarket parts one by one, explaining each decision. The electronic ignition goes back to original points in condenser. The high-pressure fuel pump gets replaced with the correct mechanical pump for 1967. These modern spark plug wires get swapped for period-correct ones with the right resistance values. The crowd watched as I worked, some asking questions, others whispering among themselves. It took 45 minutes to complete all the changes, my hands moving with the confidence that comes from a lifetime of understanding how machines work. The real problem wasn't mechanical failure, I continued, installing the last original component. It was someone trying to improve perfection without understanding why the original design was already perfect. Sometimes the old way is the right way. I wiped my hands clean and looked at Cordelia. "Ready for the test?" She nodded and slid behind the wheel. The moment of truth had arrived. I'd either just secured my daughter's future or destroyed everything we had left. Cordelia turned the key. The starter engaged, the engine turned over, and then it happened. The Shelby roared to life with a deep, throaty growl that made every car enthusiast in the garage smile involuntarily. But more than that, it settled into a perfect idle, smooth and steady as a heartbeat. She revved the engine gently, then harder. No hesitation, no roughness, no irregular timing, just pure mechanical poetry in motion. She let it idle for several minutes while everyone listened to the flawless sound of American automotive engineering at its finest. When she finally turned off the engine, the garage fell completely silent. Then Cordelia stepped out of the car and faced the crowd. Not only did Darius succeed where 3 certified mechanics failed, but he identified something else entirely. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. 6 months ago, when I first started having problems with this car, Vivian Harper recommended her ex-husband's auto shop for the repairs. Every head turned toward Vivian, whose face had gone pale as paper. Interesting that all these wrong parts, all these modifications that caused the problems, came from his inventory, almost like someone wanted this car to keep having issues. Cordelia's smile was sharp as winter steel. The question is, why would someone want to sabotage my father's car? What could they possibly gain from that? The crowd began murmuring, pieces clicking into place, understanding dawning on faces throughout the garage. Cordelia raised her voice above the whispers. This was never really about fixing an engine. This was about proving that Darius Chen has more integrity, more skill, and more genuine worth than people who inherited everything they have and never had to work for anything in their lives. Cordelia approaches Darius. I made you a promise, and I intend to keep it. But let me be clear, I'm not offering marriage out of pity or charity. I'm offering it because I've spent 6 months watching you be a better parent and a better person than anyone else in this room. I want a partner who values character over status, and I want Sloane to have a mother who will love her unconditionally. Sloane looks up at Cordelia and asks, if you marry my daddy, does that mean you'll come to my school plays? When Cordelia nods, Sloane turns to her father. I like her, Daddy. She has kind eyes like Mommy did. This moment breaks Darius's emotional walls, and he realizes he's not just gaining financial security. He's gaining a family. The other parents' attitudes shift immediately. Vivian Harper quietly leaves the gathering, her social standing destroyed by her own actions. Parents who had ignored Darius for months suddenly want to introduce themselves and apologize. But the real change comes when Sloane starts getting invited to birthday parties and playdates. Not because her family is now wealthy, but because people finally see her father for who he really is. 3 months later, at a small ceremony in the same garage where he fixed the Shelby, Darius marries Cordelia. Sloane is the flower girl, walking down an aisle lined with vintage cars and the friends who supported them through the hardest times. Joaquin serves as best man, and even some of the reformed parents from school attend. People had always seen my dirty work clothes and beat-up car and decided they knew who I was. But Cordelia saw something different. She saw a man who never gave up on the people he loved. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life are hidden under a rough exterior, and sometimes the people who judge you the harshest are the ones most afraid of being judged themselves. Today, Sloane and I aren't just surviving anymore. We're thriving, and it all started with one impossible challenge that taught me that sometimes the fix you need isn't mechanical. It's believing in yourself enough to let others believe in you too.